everybody. Welcome to the comic strip illustration masterclass. Here we are with week one, and it's a pretty exciting class we're going to have. We're going to, go through the 4 week process of Jeff will take us through this journey and explore everything about comic strip illustration and what's necessary. So really, really happy to have him here with us. I just want to thank all our partners in this project. We have the Canada Council for the Arts, all our library partners, Blue Mountains Public Library, Collingwood Public Library, and the Wasaga Beach Public Library. So all our library partners in making this happen. I want to remind everyone we do have iPads that you can take out from the Blue Mountains Public Library. We just have some now at the Collingwood Public Library, so they come with the software. So again, today we have Jeff Wilson, an award-winning cartoonist based here locally in the South Georgian Bay area. So you'll be familiar with his work, and it's published, and really, really pleased to have him with us. We are using the Procreate software is the software that he'll be demoing with as he talks through this, and it's great because it's available for low cost on the iPad and iPhone as well. So really excited to be able to do that. And again, that software is available on the iPads that you can take out through our library partners. So without any further ado, let me pass it over to Jeff. Here we go, Jeff.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And I'm so excited. This is my favorite thing in the whole world is the comic strip. It was my first love when it came to drawing and just an entertainment form that was so easy for me to enjoy. And from the time I was able to even look at a newspaper or look at anything, a television or a newspaper, the comic strips were the things that they just struck a chord with me, and I've never lost it. I've always enjoyed it. It's been a source of a lot of my life's research, and a lot of things that I've enjoyed about life have come from my enjoyment of comic strips and the comics in general. So I'm really happy to get started today, the comic strip, and I'm just going to talk a little bit to you about my roots in comics. Now, I would call the time that I grew up, which would be the late 1950s, early 1960s, kind of the silver age of the comics in the world. And there had been a golden age back when comics started, which would have been, the comic strip actually began at the turn of the 20th century, late 19th century. And it was basically brought out by the newspapers of the William Randolph Hearst Corporation, which of course it became a very big media corporation and still is quite a force to be reckoned with in the world. And the Hearst newspapers really took the comic strips and created a thing for them in newspapers, and they created the syndicates which distributed the comics to newspapers that were the big city newspapers. But at the time, which would be around the early part of the 20th century, they became part of the weekly newspapers too. I've done some research on local weeklies. Like the newspaper I do my comic for, the Dundalk Herald and the Advance of Grey Highlands, which was the former Fletcherton Advance, and also my hometown paper, which is now gone defunct, the Markdale Standard. And at the time, we're talking between the 1910s, 1920s, these newspapers would slip a comic strip in them, and they were probably purchased from the news syndicates. At the time, the King Features, I think, was a syndicate. There was endless numbers of syndicates at the time. Each of the big daily newspapers had a comic distribution service, and they would pay their cartoonists to do the cartoons. They would reproduce them, drop them in the newspapers, and then people like myself would see them. Now, I think by that point, I arrived in the world, which would be the late 1950s. The things had kind of waned down, and certainly weekly newspapers had downsized a great deal. They weren't putting in comic strips anymore in those papers, and so it was kind of a situation where it wasn't as readily available as I would have liked. but it was still quite available. And it was, living on a farm, growing up on a farm, the sources of entertainment are kind of at a premium anyway. So having had the comic strips to read and to enjoy and to entertain myself with was a real special thing. And so a lot of the comic strips I grew up with were the humor-based comic strips, but I read everything that was there. And I think from an early time, I recognized the quality of the writing, which was pretty good, but the artwork was what really caught me, was the really strong artwork. And it was artists like Charles Schulz, Al Capp, and Walt Kelly, who did different comics. And I think in particular, Walt Kelly's Pogo seemed to really resonate with me, even though I didn't understand a lot of the stuff. The drawings were just so beautifully done. And it was actually written for, if you ever read these, a lot of the strips were really for adults. They weren't for kids. and no wonder I didn't understand them. But I liked looking at them, and it was a real good experience for me to do that. I'm going to take a look now. If I'm just going to switch over to my tablet here, and you'll just give me a second here to switch over, and we'll get that in our shot here. And I'll just zoom in a bit to our tablet here. The next shot here, and I'll just do some shuffling and get that in. Let's see if I can move that a little closer here. There we go. There we got the screen there. I just want to make sure I have an angle on which to draw too, so that I can see what's going on. Let's just give it a little better angle. Okay, so let's take a look at our screen here. What I'm going to do is take off our little opening shot here. And we're going to look at a comic strip that I could find online for Walt Kelly. This is a very talented artist that throughout the 40s, 50s, and 60s, this was one of the top comics, and it just a beautifully laid out and beautifully drawn strip. Walt Kelly, the history of Walt Kelly is that he worked at Walt Disney Studios. He was considered the other Walt. Very talented guy, animated there for a number of years, but had a pretty good reputation for illustrating magazines, and his illustrations were quite popular in Saturday Evening Post. A lot of the other big American magazines carried his work, and I just want to look at the way he drew here. Very simple. He's got the background very simple here. The tree roots and the tree and the grass just so beautifully laid out here. And in my comic strip, The Average Farm, I researched Pogo to try to figure out how to simplify the background, so you just had a hint of where they were, and you didn't have to go into a lot of detail. But Walt Kelly has certainly perfected that. His character Pogo was an opossum that grew up in the I think it was the Everglade, the Okefenokee Swamp somewhere in Florida, presumably. And he was kind of what would you call it, like a ne'er-do-well, or a guy that was kind of puttered away his time in the swamp, kind of subsisted on the stuff to forage out of the bush here. And here's a little adventure with this fox coming in trying to sell him something. And very nice scene here. Very nicely laid out scene there. He's got his arm around him, and he's, winking his eye, like, Pogo here looking like, this guy's trying to sell me something I don't want. And then we have all the characters from the swamp too, which showed up regularly in Pogo. And just a but a lot of words. And I remember being a boy thinking, wow, that's a lot of words to read. It would have taken me all morning to read this, but I would probably struggle through it and try to do it. And at the end, of course, the punchline, he fails, and the guy fails to sell him something and takes off, and the rest of them are, they didn't take what he was selling. So a great way to end the comic. And the Pogo was, Walt Kelly died. These guys died very young, I find, compared to a lot of other lifestyles. But whereas Charles Schulz lived to his late 80s, Guys like Al Cap and Walt Kelly seem to live very short lifespans, but certainly very profound lifespans as well. So there's an introduction to the comic strip Pogo. And one of the things I liked about Pogo aesthetically was he would do things like this, like having the balloons overlap on the panels. Oops. Just lovely. And that sometimes the characters see on this one here, the character's hand and the banjo and go over into the border, and so do all the balloons. It's like there's no, it helps the strip to flow quite a bit. The balloons would overlap with the other balloons here. Just just little things like that would attract a young guy that was used to just, this is your comic strip panel. Everything in here is what you say, but Walt Kelly took it further. He just, this can go over here, this can go over there. And also the way comic strips were, the way they were distributed. In some comic strips, these two panels here at the top, the Pogo and then the one that says Cure All, that would be one set of panels. Then you would take this third panel, move it down to these next two panels, put it to the left, and that would be another level in your comic strip. And then the same with the next three here, that would be another level. Or let's see, three and maybe, yeah, sorry, the three plus this one too. These ones here at the left of the bottom layer, and then these three at the bottom would be the next layer. So that would actually be a 4-level comic strip distributed in a different way. And the cartoonist has to know that. And that would be an entire page. Here, the way it was a third of a page, which is pretty neat. Okay, so let's check out a cartoonist that my great uncle used to have. Well, he was good friends with him. A man named Frank Fletcher, who was the artist for Bringing Up Father. And my great uncle lived in Jekyll Island and summered there. Or sorry, I think he wintered there. Yes, he wintered in Jekyll Island in Georgia, and came to know this Frank Fletcher, who was on Bringing Up Father. Very, at the time, my grandparents used to say that he's friends with Frank Fletcher. And I said, who's Frank Fletcher? And they said, well, he draws for Bringing Up Father. And actually, Bringing Up Father, a very interesting comic strip, started by the amazing George McManus. Created this character of an Irish immigrant who came to America and a nouveau riche Irishman who still had the kind of old world sensibilities and used to being poor and from the old country and coming to the new land and having new wealth. A new wife who was I guess she was a flapper, I think. Maggie and Jigs. Maggie was the flapper who married Jigs, and well, drawing on the top of this, I better not do that. Okay, so anyway, let's get into the story of Frank Fletcher again. Now, Frank Fletcher did only the Sundays for Bringing Up Father. There was a daily that was done by another artist, and I think it was Frank Johnson. There's like two Franks for drawing this daily, this strip. I believe it was Frank Johnson. Anyway, there was a daily strip, so 6 of them were drawn by another artist. The Fletch would do these Sundays, but written by the same writer, a man named Bill Cavanaugh. And so Bill would basically write the script out, probably say, this is panel 1. My goodness, the phone must be out of order. Show Maggie with the phone and the daughter here. And I wanted to order a steak for tonight. I know what I could do. I'll write a note and have Jigs drop it off on his way to work. So Bill laid this out in kind of a script form and say with the actions and what he wanted, descriptions of what he wanted in the strip. Jigs, on your way down to town, drop this note off at the butcher on Main Street, and don't forget. So he's going to forget. This is already building up into a pretty funny gag. Oh, don't worry, you can depend on me. Oh yeah, my wife has absolutely no memory, Jigs. Neither is mine. I have to do all the thinking in our family. Very funny. Oops, I forgot to leave that order at the market, and they'll be closing soon. Yep. Hurry right over there and give him this note. Yes, sir. 2 last-minute orders. Rush them right out. Okay. Look, they sent us a steak and mushrooms, and it's too late to send them back. Oh, somebody else got our corned beef and cabbage. Hey, darling, what's cooking? Insect, as if you didn't know. And that's the end of that one. So great little gag. It was very nice timing. The drawing is really nice and smooth, and this is a great panel here with Jigs kind of nuzzling up to Maggie. So yeah, as you can see, I'm having as much fun studying what other people did and are doing than as much as doing it myself. So, and this is part of what you do too. Is if you admire what other people do, it will give you inspiration for what you do. This is a strip called Broomhilda. This now, by the way, you can go online and read these strips. They're not real good quality, but I mean the gags, you can study them. You can study them, and I've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gags that I cut out of daily newspapers, so I could study the writing, study the chronology of gag writing week to week. And a lot of strips would get into stories or themes they would get into week to week, and it was really interesting to actually to collect it and then to study it, to study how they did it. And I did that for about 2 years, and then I started to study the stuff, and I thought it occurred to me that the biggest thing that was missing in my comics, it wasn't the drawing, it was the writing, it was the gag writing, the timing. So I resolved to do that based on that research. This is a really funny strip that I used to follow. I don't anymore. I don't see it anywhere. Broomhilda by Russell Myers, who is a cartoonist and again an illustrator that did drew for many publications, periodicals throughout the 70s and 60s and 70s. Really interesting visual style too. So it starts off. Broomhilda was this little witch character, kind of a ne'er-do-well witch who kind of cranky and grouchy and kind of ugly, witch-like ugly looking. Pardon me, sir, how big is your wife? Oh, about 5'10", 150 pounds. Off she goes. He's wondering why she asked. Oh, pardon me, sir, how big is your wife? Oh, 6 feet, 160 pounds. Off he goes. He and his chicken are asking, why? Pardon me, sir, how big is your wife? Oh, 5 foot, 95 pounds. Her I can handle. And that was the gag in Broomhilda too. She was always looking for a man, and she had these great characters. This little gremlin type guy. I can't remember his name. Nerwin, I think it was. Well, anyway, they had one was a little brother of this guy, and I think that was maybe Nerwin. And then of course the vulture, who was just this really nerdy egg-headed vulture who really funny character, and actually this little guy here, the little gnome, was a very simple guy, kind of nerdy and very naive. Broomhilda and the vulture would take advantage of him a lot. It was quite a cute strip, great characters in it. And I learned a lot about writing for characters, reading a strip like Broomhilda. Okay, so there's our research. Let's presume we've got all our research done, and I just want to go into templates for doing panels, and this is something you can do before you even draw your first comic strip. You can, while you're thinking of your first comic strip, you can create the panel structure you want. Now, the Broomhilda strip we saw, it didn't always have the panel outlines, and I found that can be quite effective, even if you don't have a panel line on your panels. If you just have the open space there, very effective in the look. But anyway, for a basis, this would be for a 2-panel comic. If and a lot of times you can come up with a gag in 2 panels. It's so what you want to do is have a good variety of panels for you to work with. Now here's a new a different style where you might have a pretty long explanation and maybe a very simple punchline for your last panel. So there's an example of a very unique type of panel structure. And here's the with kind of flipped around, you have the smaller panel here and maybe a big explanation, like maybe a crowd scene or something for a punchline that you might need to. You might have something like, I wonder if anybody saw me, I don't know, saw me cook my dinner, my really great dinner last night, and then maybe all these people looking at him and him saying, I just have a feeling I'm being watched. Maybe them all looking through a window, or people lined up with their plates out ready to eat it or something. It's just, you can think of, if your mind is fertile enough, you can come up with little possible scenarios for that one. And then, of course, we have our our three equally spaced out panels. And I've just done these as very basic, kind of loose panels. I think it's kind of a nice look too. It might be something for a certain comic strip. I'm just haven't really figured out how to rule lines yet in Procreate. And if anybody has any ideas and want to share them, but in the meantime, I'm happy with this. This works well for what I'm able to do. So this is 3 equal size panels in a strip, and it's for your basic 3 panel gag. You're set up in panel number 1, and your explanation, or you're going along with the story in panel number 2, and then your punchline. I guess your crisis point, panel number 2, and then your punchline, panel 3. So that's your 3 panel gag, and then of course the 4 panel gag, and that's probably the limit that will be the 4 panels. You probably won't get into 5, but I have seen adventure strips like Spider-Man, which are based on comics, get into the 5, 6, 7 panels in a daily because they want to show a certain type of move or something. It can get quite sophisticated, but for your basic gag strip, 4 panels would be as many as you'll probably use. And so there you go. You can set up your panels right now before you've written your first comic and get started at it. It's really good to. I just wanted to go through some of the artists then what kind of panels they use. Now the older cartoonists. Now let's just go back to Fletcher here. These bringing up fathers, where let's go back there again. They were a lot of words and a lot of explanation. They were usually the 4 panel gags, and I'd say as we got into the late 50s, early 60s, comics began to simplify because because they weren't as popular. I guess the space to keep them, put them into was reduced, and that was an ongoing thing up until pretty much till Bill Watterson's time, when he insisted that they expand the sizes, and Bill Watterson and Gary Trudeau of Doonesbury wanted this to change, and it began to change somewhat, but not in newspapers. Newspapers was reducing the size because the cost of putting in comics was getting less and less, and they were requiring. And it's an ongoing thing. It's even worse today, so it's not something that got better. Let's put it that way. But anyway, the rigging up father strips were generally a 4 panel comic in the day. So let's, you can see there's a lot of words, a lot of pictures here. This is you really got to be dedicated to stick with this one. And then you had Russ Myers. He usually had no more than 3 panels. That was the most he ever did. I very rarely saw him in his dailies, that is. And this is a weekly, of course. This is a Sunday, once a week strip that goes 7 panels, including the intro here. And so his dailies would be 2 to 3 panels, and sometimes 1 panel, and that was quite amazing to be able to put a comic strip gag into a single panel. But he did it on many occasions. So that was back in I guess that would probably be in the 80s, when the comics just started to get chopped down smaller and smaller. And you see by the drawing style too, and the lettering, much bigger than even Pogo and Bringing Up Father, much smaller, and the image is much tighter, much simpler. And this was a result of the whole change in the industry. They were just simplifying. You had to simplify to be seen on the comics page. If you were too wordy, if people had to get too close to the newspaper to read Blondie and for Bringing Up Father, it was just not going to work as well for you. So anyway, so there's an explanation of that. And so let's get into the next part of it here. Let's presume you've got all those things looked after and you're ready to start your strip. Got your characters down, you've got your concept down. You've got to start getting some material out. Now, as I'm looking at the next image here, that's okay. Let's reduce this. This is a gag that I basically laid out. This is how I write gags. More often than not, I start with a situation, like maybe a regular situation. Here's a couple of guys in a coffee shop here in panel 1. And let's just make sure I'm on the right one. Okay. So panel 1, a couple of guys, could be a couple of gals. It could be a couple of kids. It could be a couple of seniors. Here you're just starting out writing your gag. And what do people talk about in coffee shops? This could be the comic strip. You could write 6 or 7 comic strips like this, where they're in this setting. Or this could be the setting for all the comic strips. This is a really the beauteous thing about comics and about writing comics, is that this could be the location of 100 of these. Anyway, in our first panel, we have the 2 folks talking, and they could be talking on the pandemic. They could be talking about their families. They could be, like we saw in the Bringing Up Father, they could be complaining about their wives forgetting or their husbands forgetting things. There's no end of things that they could be doing. And in the next panel, I like to do this. Not everybody does, but I like to have the characters turning and, kind of doing what you might do in a coffee shop, sipping your coffee. Our second character here, just looking off to the side with an expression of some kind. He might not have that. Okay, let's get the right panel here. Oh, I see I'm not on the right background here. There we go. So I'll just get my eraser here at the top, and I will just erase this mouth here. And whoops, let's reduce the brush size here. Let's increase it a bit more. They could be smiling as they're talking about something, or they could be just kind of blah, just like, it's an ordinary day, and you're drinking your coffee. I'm looking around, and then we have panel 3 here. They both look at the camera. They've had a revelation of some kind, and then you'd have to think of a punchline to relate, but I had little nuclear mushroom clouds coming out of their head. I remember a funny quote by somebody years ago saying that, if you can't think of an ending, think of a nuclear holocaust, which ends everything. It's what happens, but this was their theory, and that's why I added it here, because it was, if you can't think of an ending, that's the ending. So anyway, so think of your dialogue here. They could be, I've got a headache. This guy could have a headache, and he's saying, maybe he could say, yeah. The guy on the right could be saying, yeah, I hate headaches. They make me not a very pleasant person. I get grouchy and cranky and make me so in such a bad mood. I can't contain myself. And then, oh, what he just said. And then at the end, neither of them contain themselves, or maybe just have the one guy with a nuclear holocaust. You could change this, modify this, put his head on, and him observing the other guy with his blowing up. I don't know. It's your setup. You got your setup here, your introduction. Where are they? What are they doing? What's the topic of conversation? Take it along a little further. yeah, I don't like headaches, so kind of an exchange of opinions, thoughts, and the crisis. Oh, something's going to happen based on what you just said, and then the punchline, the final panel, which is should be something that kind of completes the idea, the whole idea of completing the thought, um, and giving it a final look as well, and hopefully the audience gets it and laughs and comes back tomorrow and sees more. So this isn't a real perfect example, but it does show the timeline, the chronalization, or the timeline of what happens in a 4-panel gag. So yeah, you could take that every day for a week, and you could have these guys or gals in a coffee shop, and I think we're all aware of the coffee shop background. There's no end of things you can put in it, and that's the other thing for your comics too is you can put your characters in very familiar situations to you and relax. Put yourself in that atmosphere, relax as if you're there, and you will find no end of ideas coming to you as to how you can take it in different directions. So that's an idea too. That's fodder for future thought as well. So let's take that away, and then I had that. Let's recall these panels here where we had the before we show our gag or our story there. I'll take this down. So here's our panels. So this is what I was talking about. If you had a panel with some action and maybe a fair bit going on, and then you want to simplify it to one final thought at the end. That's why you would use that panel. So with that in mind, okay, let's go back to the other one I had here. There we go. So panel 1 here is a character walking along, tripping here in action number 2. So this is a bit of animation here too, and then landing here on their face, and and then the punchline: gravel is a good dietary source of fiber. Okay, it's that's a kind of a tight ending. There's not a lot of it's stickman character here, very simple. But my philosophy as far as gag writing is less is more. If you can tell it in less words, in a couple pictures, you're doing your job. So anyway, that takes us along pretty good here. So I think I might just try to show you in a 2-panel gag. This is a tricky one. The 2-panel gag is I'm just going to create one here. The 2-panel gag is a very tricky way to draw a story. So I'm going to create a new panel here. I'm going to create a new layer. Let's see. I think I've got it there. Create it with a blue pencil here. I'm just going to rough in a storyline here, maybe with some stickmen, nothing too sophisticated. And to start with, but we'll start something here. Okay, maybe I used to do this a lot in my average farm comics, where I'd have the 2 farmers leaning on the fence here talking, and there'd be like a post between them and see which one is Irv and which one is Herm, the neighbor. And then I'd kind of tighten up a bit, just so I knew who they were, I guess, basically. And this is a really crude version of the strip, but anyway, this is kind of how I started, just a doodle, just a basically rough sketch. And this was a very familiar thing to me, or it became familiar to me because I put them in this situation so often. And it was just 2 guys talking about things that were going on, about things like And then I would just kind of lightly write in here, I can solve every facing man in the last 10 years. And then we could have, yeah, I always like to change this last panel. So what I would often do is, if it was kind of a thought like this, I would put them in silhouette. It was just something I did. I don't even know what caused me to do it, but to me, it was a very interesting thing to have that change, that transition, and putting these people in it. So I got to know the way the characters looked in silhouette. And I remember I got a compliment on this by a cartoonist I really appreciated hearing it from, Lynn Johnston, who looked at, I really like your use of the silhouettes in your comics, and it's very effective. And I took that as a real high compliment. So even if I haven't come up with a punchline yet, I think I know that I'm going to have something here that I just have him sitting here, and maybe the barn in the background. And while I'm trying to come up with the punchline here, barn in the background, and maybe a couple trees here, and the fence here, obviously. And yeah, maybe I'll just take this part out here. Maybe I'll put the barn over here, yeah, because I'm still trying to come up with a punchline, right? So, and maybe put the barn in here, and then take the barn out here. This sounds like a Yogi Berra-ism coming here. I can solve every problem facing man in the past 10 years. Yeah. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, I got the idea. The punchline is going to be, throw your calendars and deal with what's going on today. Very philosophical. And that's the beginning of the idea. I really think I can work on the wording of that. That's another thing. Simple is less is more. If you can cut the wording down, if you can cut the wordiness of that statement, throw out the calendar, and sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Throw out the calendar and deal with today. Yeah, there's a better way of saying it, but that's what we're doing this for. We're working on the wording of it. So we've got throw out the calendar and deal with today. So there's probably a better way of saying it. And then, of course, I like the idea, so I would probably go ahead and do another layer here and clean that up a fair bit. And let's create a new layer here. And I would just put this in the black pen and make it. I like to use the inking tool, the Studio Pen. That's just one I've really come to like a lot. And little cleaner line there. Good old Irv's hair, little curly Q hair, which is a long story in itself. And of course, his neighbor Herm. with a very unusually shaped head. But you know what? I just found so many farmers that I knew in my youth that he he was like those people. He became those people, those characters of my youth from the growing up on the farm, and just wonderful people with delightful senses of humor. That's one thing I found out about farmers is that their sense of humor is so innate and natural that they anyway. So there's a basis of the idea. Of course, yours will be much better than this, but you start drawing it and then you work on the wording and on the let's see the your verbiage. What will your story be for your character? And two panel gag. So you would continue on. You would write your cartoon. You would do about 6 weeks of dailies and about so that would be 6 times 6 is 36 dailies and 6 weeklies. We're talking 42 comic strips for your first submission to a syndicate. If it were back in the day when I was submitting cartoons, and you'd be on your way. And we will next week we will talk a little more about your comic strip, about how to develop it. And I'm going to at this time turn it back to Tom, and I'll bring my stuff back here. And here I am back here again.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I'll just really fantastic session. Really good. Nice to go over the whole history too. I think that's important to understand. Where comic strips come from, right? Like that whole historical approach. So yeah, always love to learn new things in these sessions too. So I put Jeff's email in the chat there too. I put my email and Jeff's email. So if you have questions about the session as we proceed, questions or some topics that are you'd like Jeff to even include, you can send him an email. If you have questions about the equipment, or you want to take an iPad out and start accessing some of the equipment from one of our library partners, and you want to have the use an Apple Pencil, use Procreate, and start a 2-panel, for example, and get going on syndication production, then you can definitely send me an email. I can talk about what you need. You can access it in the. You just need a library card with one of the library partner organizations, and that comes in many ways. So like if Blue Mountains Public Library, if you want to get the card there, and you live in Meaford, you can get a card. If you live in Grey Highlands or Markdale, there's a whole the Grey County of library network, so you can get a library card at Blue Mountains Public Library that way. If I don't have the answer, if you live in a specific place, I'll find out. So just send me that email if you're looking to access it. And then also on the Simcoe County side, with the Collingwood Public Library, Woodstock Beach Public Library, you can look at access there as well. And again, there are some iPads around and so on, and then we'll be getting into some in-person workshops in the near future, and we'll be bringing out iPads, so you can then come directly with Jeff and draw on the iPads as well. So that's kind of just an update on where things stand. But in the meantime, if you have a tablet, if you have an iPad, you can get either Procreate or some sort of a drawing software. Really, go for something low cost. You can probably do $20 or less. That's how we like to keep it. So in terms of just what we're doing here, so there's the 3 more weeks. We'll be looking at all of the comic strip illustration, and I'm just going to flip back over here to the panel here. So yeah, if any kind of technical questions, and then creatively, if you have questions, just send Jeff an email, and he can take it from there. And questions and any of that information. So here, Jeff, I'll give it back to you just to do a final farewell, and we'll wrap it up.
Okay, well, thanks, Tom. And that was it's fun for me to go over all this stuff too. There's there's so much that I've taken in over the years. It is easy to do that when you like to do something like this. The comic strip is my has been something that I've always appreciated, and so it's great for me to go back on it. But I think because I'm such a student of it, it's I've learned where it's gone, where it's going, and it really it's never left me, and it's only expanded itself and to me. So and that's because I like it so much, and because it is very interesting. The history of it in itself is fascinating. So it will probably continue to be something that I like, and that I'll be sharing with people, even if I'm hoping that the day will come that if I'm in the nursing home, I'll be making people chasing people away because I know too much about it. But uh, all I can really say is that it's something that you can enjoy, and if you find you enjoy it as well, it's a really easy thing to get started at. But the hard part is when you begin to follow through and do it. But there is a reward for that, and that's becoming good at it and becoming, it's very rewarding. Is what I'm trying to say. So I wish you well. By all means, give me a shout if you're enjoying it, or if you're not enjoying it, if you're running into troubles with it. I'm here to help you, encourage you. Tom's here to help you in whatever technical ways. We'll help you through it if you want to pursue it further. And good luck. And thanks for joining today. And we'll see you next week.
Perfect. Thanks, Jeff. So yeah, thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Next week, week 2, same place. If you have signed up through Eventbrite, you want to get the automatic reminders, you can get a ticket for each week, and that way it will send you the reminders of your event. Otherwise, on the online ticket page that you've joined us with today, you will already see there's weeks 2, 3, and 4, so you can watch it directly on the page, and we've also put the links directly to the Vimeo link for this webinar. And at the end of this, you can replay it so that everything gets archived at the same link. So once this is done, it puts it on as a recorded video, so you can rewatch it and go over any of these topics. So feel free to do that as well if you've missed anything, or if you can't attend it live next week, just you can rewatch it right after in the afternoon or evening, whenever works for you. So we make it really flexible, so you don't have to be live, but we hope you are, and we'll see you next week. Take care again, and have a great rest of the day.